Hello, it's the Anfield Wrap. It's John Gibbons hosting this week, and I'm joined by Neil Dockin, by Andy Heaton, and by Neil Jones. And it's the second of our series of big questions. So during the World Cup, we thought we'd try and answer, or at least have a stab at some of the big issues affecting Liverpool Football Club on and off the pitch currently. So last week, we did FSG / the ownership situation. And this year, we're going to talk about the midfield question. Also, right at the end of this, we've got another audio trailer, a brand new one you won't have heard before, for a fantastic Klopp documentary, which is out soon. There'll be 3 episodes out in December, and then a couple more to follow early next year. So do listen out for that at the end. But first of all, I want to talk about the midfield and how we've sort of got to this position, really, and whether there's any mitigating circumstances, whether there's any understandable reasons why we're in this position now that we need an overhaul. So I'm going to go from the most reasonable person in the room to the least reasonable person. So I'll start with Neil Jones and then with Neil Dockin. So Neil,
I was worried there. Where am I going to fit in here?
You see, that joke worked better when it was Sean Rogers going to be in the middle, but Andy stepped in and there was an argument where he would go. But I enjoyed Neil Dockin being the punchline, so I stuck with it. No, but seriously though, Neil, do you have an element of understanding why Liverpool are in the position they're in now with the midfield, or do you think it's complete negligence?
Yeah, probably a little bit of mitigation, but I think that there's a little bit of negligence as well in there. I mean, I sort of there's 2 things really that I look at. One is the sort of the fact that the manager has more faith in players, I think, than anyone at the club, in my opinion. In terms of like people like Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain, maybe James Milner, Naby Keita. But then I also look at the Thiago signing, and I think that's sort of, it's such a big outlier in everything that Liverpool have done in the last sort of 10 years almost, or certainly 5 years. It's such a different signing to anything they've ever made. It's the only player they've ever really bought from a top club that was established. The age of them, the talent and the way he plays is so different to everything they do. And it felt like a real sort of attempt to shift to a new place. But I think if you're going to do that, everything else has to be really reliable. And I think he needs to almost be the decoration that on top of it. And I think what actually they've stumbled into Thiago coming in, and the rest of it all needs sort of rebuilding around him. And I think you've got to give them criticism for sort of allowing both Keita and Oxlade-Chamberlain to be into the final year. And obviously they can't get rid of them for any money. They're going to watch them leave. That's what, £85 million worth of midfielders for nothing. And yeah, they're in the position now where they need 2 minimum midfielders, probably 3 to come in, or certainly to step up. And it's not going to be cheap.
It's not. It's just on the point of Oxlade-Chamberlain. I'm going to be playing a lot of devil's advocate in the first 10-15 minutes, so forgive me, listener and fellow panellist here. But do you think it's possible or even probable that they would have gone under this sort of different circumstances? Because it doesn't feel like a stronger selling market at the moment for a club like Liverpool, post-COVID and sort of things like that, really. And I wonder whether there's a lot of talk around FSG at the moment. I don't want to turn too much into an FSG show, but the idea that they had a model and the model sort of ended up collapsing based on, what happened sort of in the world, really. But I wonder whether under normal circumstances, if you like, Keita and Chamberlain maybe would have been moved on last summer, but because it's funny with the spending, because obviously the real top it's not changed at all, and that sort of screwed Liverpool. I think we thought there was going to be a new normal there for everyone else. So we're just cracking on. Don't worry, at the very top. But those middle teams who would give you £30 million for your midfielder and would think, well, we will stretch our wage budget for the superstar. I think those guys have got a bit more cautious, and maybe Liverpool have found it more difficult.
I'm not sure about that in the Premier League. I mean, I look, West Ham spent on Lucas Paquetá, and there's a lot of teams who spent. I mean, there's some who seems like the bottoms fell out of them a little bit. Leicester be a good example of one that maybe you could have said they're the kind of player that you might have got Oxlade-Chamberlain to. But you look at Newcastle spending money. West Ham, Everton have carried on spending to a degree in terms of bringing players in. So I think there is maybe the European market. You've lost that sort of getting it into a La Liga club or a Serie A club. I think they've lost a lot of their power. But I still think there is maybe the timing of it was, if you look at, I could have seen a scenario where Oxlade-Chamberlain was sold immediately after the title win. I think that was probably the time where you would have looked and said, okay, yeah, thanks for that. You've done great. You've got 2 years left or 3 years left on your contract. You would have had some takers, and obviously that was when the uncertainty came in with the pandemic. But I'm not sure. I mean, I think it's more. I don't think Keita would have been sold. I think Liverpool have had the faith in him. I think maybe the question or the loss of faith in him is the fact that the contract situation has played, into where we've got now. I don't think they would have sold him unless it was a sort of a mega offer.
With Chamberlain, do you think he would have been sold in the summer if he hadn't got injured?
I think there've been offers. You'd have to think that, wouldn't you? I think that late in the window there would have been. I mean, that's just the story of their career almost, isn't it? It's like it's never mind the injuries themselves. It's the timing of the injuries. They always seem to be injured when Liverpool really need them not to be, or when it would help them massively if they weren't. But possibly, but then, I mean, you sort of imagine. Can you imagine some of the criticism Liverpool would have got had the season panned out and he'd sold Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain as well? That it's one thing to be without him because of injury, but if you've decided, we'll sell him for 15 million, and then you're in that position, it would have been, tough questions.
What do you think, Andy? Do you think there's any sort of, mitigating circumstances? I've thrown a few sorts of options, in the agenda, whichever way you got 2 minutes before we started. But do you think there's any, do you have any sort of sympathy, if you like, for the manager or for anyone in terms of, the situation we've ended up with regard to the midfield?
I think they've been unlucky. And I know Artur was a panic last minute move, but such as the luck Liverpool have been having lately, he finally gets near match fit and then he's out for another 5 months. I'm not just saying that in isolation, but it just seems to be a recurring pattern. So and this is me apologising for them, trying to put it into context.
Of course, yeah.
The seasons that we won the European Cup and the Champions League, our injury days, I haven't got a chart in front of me, but our days lost to injury, I'd love to see what it's been compared to the last 2 years. We had whether we were just really, really lucky or were really, really unlucky at the minute. You just don't know, but what I do agree with it is that they've gambled on it this season, and I think it's quite clear that gamble hasn't paid off. Yeah. Even if we go deep in the Champions League, we've kind of thrown away any realistic title challenge. I think we could have said that 2 or 3 months ago, to be honest. And then you've got the other side of it. The one thing I come back and I would say it's in the agenda, but you don't know what moves they made in the summer, and we saw it with Alisson and with Van Dijk. If they got their mind set on someone, the hell bent on getting that person through the door. Now, with Alisson and Van Dijk, it worked out because they got them. Now, Van Dijk was one that I think they were always going to get, but you forget when we signed Alisson up until a week before, there was chat that Real Madrid were favourites for him.
Chelsea as well, yeah.
And Chelsea, and then there was this mad turn around the goalkeepers where Kepa ends up signing for Chelsea. Courtois goes from Chelsea to Madrid.
Yeah.
Chelsea get Arrizabalaga, and we end up getting Alisson. But if we don't get Alisson, where are we?
Yeah.
You know what
Danny
I mean?
Ward. That was the chat, wasn't it?
Well, exactly. So yeah, Danny Ward. Jeez. I didn't mean to slag Danny Ward off then. I'm sorry, Danny.
Well, or Jesus.
So where I'm getting to with this is the Tchouaméni was the one that I think it's fair to say, without speculation, just from what's been documented, that they were fairly down the track. And it just didn't happen. Now, can you criticise the fact of not being a backup plan, the fact that they only got Arthur over the line at the very last minute? Yeah, I think they were. I think negligence is the right word for it. But I'd also caveat that with saying we have also been unlucky. I think the comments around Naby Keita and Oxlade-Chamberlain are spot on. I like Naby as a player, but the fact of the matter is he just hasn't been available enough.
Yeah.
And, Oxlade-Chamberlain, again, people forget, and I always feel sorry for him. The season we won the Champions League until he'd done his knee in the semi-final. Was it the semi-final, was it?
Yeah, it was they didn't win it, did he go to the final?
Got to the final.
Madrid, yeah.
But he was sensational that season.
It was the Roma game he got in.
Yeah, and you talk about Klopp putting faith in the players, but maybe that's just part of how we motivate. Maybe that's just part of how we get so much buy-in. No, don't worry about it. I'm going to stick with you. You're my man. And, it's it's obviously backfired this season.
I also think with Oxlade-Chamberlain, more so than Keita, he suffered, again, timing. We're talking about timing of injury. He was becoming the real link between midfield and attack. He was sort of half and half, wasn't he? In that sense. And by the time he came back and was in position, Liverpool just didn't play that way. Trent was sort of the main attacking outlet, and Robertson and obviously Salah and Mane had established themselves as the best wide forwards. So it was sort of like we don't really need you shooting from outside the box and running forward. You need to keep the ball better, and you need to be better in tight areas, and he's not really like that. So by the time he came back, it was almost like I felt there was a period where he wasn't a midfielder almost anymore. It was sort of like, no, you come on down the right if we want to change the system, or you're just a sub now, unfortunately, and that it's not really his fault. But I do think every time he's played, really, in the last sort of 18 months, he's looked a little bit like he's in the wrong team. He just plays a different way to the way Liverpool play. You think of Wijnaldum, you think of whatever you think. I know we'll talk about these players, but whatever you think of sort of like Curtis Jones, he does play the way Liverpool ask him to play. You might say he can do a bit more, but he doesn't. You never see him sort of doing things that you go, what are you trying to achieve here? And I think Oxlade-Chamberlain is the one that you look in that squad and says, I don't know where he fits.
Neil, can I ask, sorry, John, it's just something that occurred to me. Just I read something about a month ago that kind of intimated, I read a few things that kind of intimated that almost like a disconnect between the management team and like the medical sports science team. And I can't quite remember where I read it, but then you tie that in with a couple of the well, we've not had a club doctor since August. They've only really addressed that.
Sorted that now, boxed.
Yeah, but that's it now.
Cast.
It'll be all right.
But, and I'm not asking you to give anything away about your knowledge on it, but there does seem to be, like, I remember when Peter Bruckner was in there, and I think it was Roy Hodgson saying that, the doctor said they couldn't play him. And do you think, has there been an element of that where that the manager's gone, no, I need him, and there's been like, I don't know whether.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about that with in these specific instances, because they're sort of long-term injuries, aren't they? So I don't think it's sort of Liverpool could have played Oxlade-Chamberlain.
He's
tore his hamstring, so he's out. He's gone sort of for 3 months.
But is that a conditioning issue? That's what I'm saying. So we go from the seasons
I think a bit of this season comes down to the pre-season. I think the different, maybe the coincidence there that we're talking about. You mentioned obviously the 18-19 season and the following year and last season to a degree. That big run up to the season where they go to Evian, they do the behind closed doors sort of work. This season they were back to doing commercial tours. It was a short pre-season. I think they were obviously very big, and I know he gets a bit of stick for it, but Pep Lijnders, his thing is intensity, and they were obviously going massive on the idea of being intense, and I think that they've probably had to pay the price for it early in the season. That you look at, if you remember the Community Shield, City looked about 3 weeks behind Liverpool, and I thought in that game physically, but they didn't need to be up to speed by then. They needed to sort of work their way in through the season, and City is sort of in a position where I think they can bank on. We only have to be sort of 75% to win a lot of our league games, but come sort of October, November, we could be really pairing. And I think Liverpool went into the season sort of feeling like they were right up for it, and then realising, hang on, people are twanging and snapping, left, right, and centre. You look at just from that game alone, the drop off is incredible. Curtis Jones went in a 2-minute cameo. Konate goes on the Monday night. Keita done something in the Community Shield. Thiago limps off in the first game. Then you've got Nunes. I think Matip was injured. You end up with Nat Phillips in your first home game of the season playing centre back, and it's all just spiraled from there.
I've got very little sympathy.
Well, that's why I came to you last.
You'll be unsurprised to hear. Just talking then about all the players picking up injuries, we obviously ask so much of our players, and what Klopp does is so intensive. And over the last couple of years, we've obviously had a number of strange scenarios that have meant players have had to give even more. So Thiago's an interesting point in that summer when we signed Thiago, a player with all these fabulous abilities, but himself a poor injury record. We've taken a risk, you could say, in investing so heavily in him. And then that year goes the way it does with so many issues that so many players are asked to play so many minutes. And then obviously last season as well, going for the quadruple, the same. That summer, 1920, I feel like we were the best team in the country by a distance. We were in prime position to win another league title. I can understand why it was time to move Lovren on. But to go back to that, Lovren leaves the club and a new centre-half doesn't come in. And straight away it's alarm bells because Gomez has got a severe injury record. Matip, we know, can't play 3 games in a week, has all these injury problems. And then it comes to pass, we have a defensive crisis. You then have midfielders pulled into defence and midfielders being asked to play every week, every 3-4 days. Henderson needs resting. He needs to be used wisely. We've run the legs off him. Genie that season, we just basically say, well, you're going in the summer, so you're going to play every minute.
Yeah.
And we just run the legs off him. I feel that decision around Lovren is a large factor in us not winning another league title. So then that summer, Genie leaves, and you think, well, they've learned their lesson. We need to replace Genie's minutes. He plays virtually every minute, every league game. He does such a tireless role. There's a suggestion that Thiago was his replacement, but Thiago could never be Gini Wijnaldum. He could never give us what Gini gave us. And we're in a position where, as I say, we know that Fabinho has some issues. I think Henderson has a lengthy layoff at the end of that season. He gets injured around the January time.
He comes back for the Euros, doesn't he?
He does himself in the derby, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Stretching or something.
And he's playing every week and he's playing at
centre-half in that game, yeah.
And I just thought we need another midfielder here, it's clear.
I think another factor in is Elliot comes in, doesn't he, and sort of for the first month you go, oh, that's a really sort of look, and then he breaks his leg and it's sort of, so you know that you can't really legislate for that, but yeah, I thought whatever you think about Gini Wijnaldum as a player, and for some reason he seems to get a bit of stick towards the end of his Liverpool career, which I don't understand. But the one thing that you sort of, I remember Jürgen. Unfortunately, it wasn't that sort of place where you could really have that debate. It was one of them where Jürgen said, go on, you tell me. And it was to James Pearce, you tell me what kind of midfield you need. And sort of everything in here screaming, one that's fit. You know, you want to say one that's fit and plays every game. The one you just got rid of.
Just to talk about that, Neil, because it really makes me laugh, because you guys, get a lot of stick on Twitter. I don't know if you've noticed about like...
not anymore, no. I don't
what do you think of the Suarez quotes, Neil?
Well, yeah. Well, no, I mean, that was good Twitter. But bad Twitter is... It does make me laugh when people sort of like have a go at you saying like, oh, you've not been saying this and saying that. But that was like a proper row between like James Pearce and Jürgen. That was years ago.
That was on Zoom. And if you know how it works in the press conferences, once you've asked your question, you get moved from a panellist to a attendee.
Yeah.
So you literally couldn't anyway. So James could just be shouting into his webcam saying, no, I want you to buy it. But he couldn't, So people said, you soon backed down, didn't you, when he said that? I was like, no, I literally, I've been muted. Unless I can do sign language.
That exchange always pops into my head when people say, like, you guys don't ask him about midfielders. He
used the phrase, didn't he? I think the phrase he used was the golden cow. He said, what do you want, the golden cow? And I see what he's saying, if everyone's fit and available, on the first day of pre-season, you've got everything covered. But the point is, 3 weeks into the season, you haven't, because 3 of them have gone. And,
it's predictable.
We'll all guess who the 3 are, It sort of is that. So I do understand it, but I think, it comes down to, I think Klopp I think he sees the upside in a lot of these players rather than the downside. And, I disagree with it, really. I think you've got to the stage where you look and say, no, you can't bank. I think with Joe Gomez, I think his time's gone with Liverpool in terms of he's going to be our centre back. He's not. He won't. He might be for 2 months, 1 month, whatever, but he's not going to be over the course of a season because he's not fit enough.
There's undoubted misfortune with Elliot, but my point at the time was it's asking a lot for an 18-year-old lad to come in and be fulfilling that role week in, week out. We all know young players will really impress for 2 or 3 games and they'll have a dip. And that's why the experience and the consistency that Genie brought was so important. Last season ends in such phenomenal fashion, and the second half of the season, what they do is Herculean, and they deserve so much credit. But they had got themselves into a position where they were a long way behind, and they had to claw all the way back. And in the first half of the season, I was watching a lot of games thinking, we don't have enough control in midfield. With Genie gone, we don't hold up, we don't possess, we don't keep the ball well enough, we're not press resistant enough, we don't do some of the things we used to do. There were games like Milan where we went behind, we let a lead slip, and then we went on to win it. Atletico Madrid, we let a lead slip, we went on to win it. Brighton, Brentford, even City.
Chelsea away.
Yeah, Chelsea away. Even the City game where, Salah scored the goal of the season. And we've just got to hang on. We've just got to show a bit of nous and control the game. And it seems to me, especially first half of last season, that we just didn't control matches.
But that Thiago wasn't fit for, Thiago sort of, it did coincide that he had a really good run of being in the side, didn't he? End up in the team of the year, but I think he did miss quite a lot of the first part of the season. Elliott was playing again, wasn't he, in that season? Curtis Jones played quite a bit, I think. Brentford
Keita plays 40 games last year, and he's great in the running, and I'm a massive fan of what he can do. And at Wembley, you've got Klopp coming off the pitch saying, did you see that?
Yeah.
Did you see what Naby can do? So I do understand the faith that he has in these players, but at some point you've got to think, I wouldn't mind like a £25 million workhorse, I wouldn't mind you going and signing the next genie, a lad that's
Milner.
on your list.
Don't get in another Milner.
Yeah, go get a lad who's the third or fourth name down your list, not Bellingham, not Tchouaméni, a lad that you think you can turn into a cracking player for Liverpool.
But didn't we get into that whole previously when we were signing third and fourth on the list? Wasn't the criticism that Liverpool compromise too much in the...
But when they signed Gini Wijnaldum, for example, a lot of people are going, attacking midfielder from Newcastle.
But when they signed Gini, he was a priority for the club. He wasn't cheap either.
But my point is, I think he wasn't a superstar. He wasn't a player that the fans were saying, get him.
But neither was Andy Robertson, though. What I'm saying is these players...
Stop signing Andy Robertson.
So sign more of them. That's my point. We don't have to spend 100 million to improve this midfield. I don't believe that.
Where are they, though? I mean, we don't know. Maybe they've tried. What I'm saying is when they signed Wijnaldum, he wasn't even a controlling midfielder. He was more an attacking player. So they had to define the idea of what they wanted him to do. And maybe the market's catched up. Maybe analytics teams from other teams have caught up because nothing's ever new in football for long. Nothing's ever fresh.
What it comes back to is then the question is, so Jurgen Klopp, Pep Linders, Julian Ward go to the owners and say, we need a £25 million workhorse. I want to buy Yuri Tillemans with 1 year left on his contract from Leicester. And he said, okay, yeah, so who's going? So they say, well, so who's going? Because we're not putting another 100 grand on the wage bill for someone who, if everyone's fit, might not be on the bench. I mean, we saw last season when there was it is mad to think that sort of February, March. I asked Jurgen 2 or 3 times, how hard is it to leave out some of these players off the bench? Joe Gomez. I think Curtis wasn't in the squad for the...
Chamberlain was
Curtis didn't get in the squad for the League Cup final. I think Harvey Elliott was missing out on squads. There was...
What's the game at Southampton where is Ox not even involved?
He didn't even get off the bench. Yeah.
And that to me was, I just thought that day,
Minamino's top scorer in the 2 cups, doesn't get a minute in either of the cup finals. Origi gets on for a bit in the League Cup, doesn't he? But, and then people are saying, what about Kevin Keller? How are you going to sort of keep him happy? We were talking about Liverpool having sort of the best squad going, but you can't... FSG will not do what sort of other clubs will, Manchester United, and just ride that wage bill and say, well, if we need them for 5 games, that's worth the cost. You'll need to get one out the door and justify it. And
it's got to be hard to shift a lad on big wages. Ox's wages are obviously large.
Exactly. You look at, and also Oxlade-Chamberlain's a homegrown player for the squad. I think Joe Gomez thought that's a big reason behind his renewal. I think Curtis Jones, one of the reasons behind it, why they've renewed that is because at least it's sort of, we know roughly what we'll get with him, and he fits a box there. They'll hope some of these younger players will come through. Bajcetic is one that could touch wood, save a lot of money down the line somewhere, but it's still a long way off. He's 17, coming into the first team picture. But I think that's why they won't do that sort of short-term signing. And also what you'd also say is, when they've done it, it's not worked. Ozan Kabak, just get someone in, just get a centre-back in. Actually, Liverpool would have been better not getting a centre-back in than Ozan Kabak and Ben Davies. It was a waste of time, really, wasn't it? And Arthur, the same. Just get a midfielder in late in the window. We've got one in. Now we've got to pay him while he's doing his rehab.
The mistake's the summer before, though, isn't it? It's the time, but it's the planning in advance rather than the last minute.
Yeah, I think I couldn't believe they'd let Gini go without someone coming in, whatever. I think Elliott's going to be an absolute star. I think he already is close to being a star, but I think, you needed someone who was a high level, and a high level in terms of his availability as well.
Just to sort of talk a bit about structural issues as well. And I'll come to you on this, Andy, because I think that is worth noting as well, because, you know, we talk a lot about personnel, and when you see the midfield not working, it's, well, he's not doing the job, or he's not good enough, or we're missing this type of player. But I think it is worth knowing a little bit that structurally it's not been quite right, and so that's made players look like they're struggling maybe even more than sort of what they are. And I was reminded of this watching England play USA, and Jude Bellingham's getting legged everywhere and is just chasing shadows. And I'm watching that thinking, well, it's not as simple as just throw him in and he's going to sort all this out. This isn't me having a go with Bellingham. I think he's a brilliant player. If anything, I'm having a go with Southgate. But watching that is just a reminder that if your structure's not right, or if you're outnumbered in the midfield, even a player who's been the most hyped player, you know, in the country can end up looking stupid.
Yeah, but it goes back, and I know it's a massive cliche, the one about playing the piano and carrying it.
Yeah.
You know, you can have all the stardust in the world. I think the Thiago one's an excellent point. Unless you've got the support behind him and give him the room to actually do what he can do, then actually it can be a negative. You may as well throw, not for want of a better word, and you may as well throw a dog in. He'll do all your running for you. Because if you're not in a position where you can show yourself, then, you know, your natural game changes. And we talk about exceptionally talented footballers. They do have a specific skill set. It's mad.
Yeah.
It's mad. Yeah. What makes them unique is that they
makes them so valuable.
What makes them so valuable? They've got these gifts.
Yeah.
But you've got to, you know, you've got to support these players. So I think you're all right. I think, you know, the Bellingham one's an excellent point. I mean, we can talk all day about leaving, you know, your most creative players out your England side, but, you know, that's a completely different argument.
Rice was floundering as well, wasn't he?
But they were just struggling with the system, and ironically, it's Henderson comes on and sorts it, and with the much maligned Bobby, you know, that's
the case.
That's not for another day. Actually, literally this topic.
But that's the case in point. If you and it keeps going back to, I think the question on this is, if everyone's fit, do Liverpool have a good starting 11? Yeah. I think that's undoubted. Yeah. But if they don't, what have you done to mitigate that? So I think we all agree broadly it's not being mitigated. I mean, the structural stuff, and I know you'd never know, but I just love to know the conversations that have gone on in the background. I mean, it's often said, and I think it's right, that all football managers are liars. They lie through the teeth. That's the job. I'm got a problem with that. But you create this vacuum. You create this vacuum that's constantly filled. And we've seen it, and unfortunately, you know, as much as we try and dismiss it as not important, well, it is, because it ekes out. We've seen that with footballers coming up and saying, "Oh, we've seen this stuff on social media." Marcus Rashford the other day was talking about it. Anyway, so back to the football. Sorry, digress there. I do wonder, Liverpool specifically, what Liverpool looks like in 6 months' time. Not just specifically in the squad, but the club itself. Yeah. But with so much going on, and I'm not. And again, I'm doing the thing that I hate. I'm speculating, but I'd love to know what has caused these so-called, well, not so-called, they proved it, these world-class engineers in the background, if we want to call them that, to decide that Liverpool's not the place for them anymore.
Yeah.
You know, to lose one is unlucky. To lose two, you know, but then that's three gone. That's three gone now. So if you take Julian Ward's gone, and then Ian Graham's gone. Wouldn't surprise me the doctor leaving. It wouldn't surprise me if we probably see more. But at the same time, there's always better. There's always better. So you wonder what comes in next, because one thing you've got to give the ownership group credit for is that they've been proactive when things like this have happened, and they've acted and they've not. I think it's the first time where you could say they've kind of sat back and been not as proactive. Maybe this is wishful thinking on my part, because I always like to look for the positives in it. In 12 months' time, we'll look back on this and go, right, I can see what that was now. They were growing pains. Could have been managed better, but I can see what they were trying to do. So, for instance, Darwin Núñez, people say Liverpool don't spend money. They went out and got the man. Yeah. They went out.
Salah's contract, you know, I think that's another one that's sort of underplayed, is that I've seen people say, we had a terrible summer. They didn't have a terrible summer. They had a summer that was probably that much short of being, you know.
But it shows you don't find the margins are, though.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I to go to your point about the backroom stuff, I think part of it is, if you think about, Neil mentioned about the team, what they've had to give. I think that's reflected in the entire club. They've been on a tightrope for sort of 5 years where every decision sort of has to be justified. Every decision has to be close to being right, and if it isn't, then there's a consequence for it. And every game has mattered. So, it's sort of, the judgment is instant. It's not a case of, listen, we'll have a little teething period here in 3 months and we'll see, and then we'll let Nunez settle into his rhythm and this and that. It's not. It's like, why is this happening? Why is this not gone right? Why aren't we right at the top of the league? Look at what City have gone away. Oh no, we're out the League Cup in the first round. That's another season, and that must give a pressure to the backroom staff, to the medical staff, to the recruitment team, to the manager. I mean, we've seen periods, I think, where the manager's sort of, I think he's looked absolutely kettled. At times where you think, I've worried about him a little bit. Where you think, is he? I don't think now, but I think he has got to a stage. Certainly in the pandemic season, I thought he was going to go, to be honest. But it must put a strain on you. And you think, Julian Ward's been there since 2012. That's a decade. He's only 41. It's a quarter of his life spent in this sort of pressure cooker. I don't know about Ian Graham personally, what type of character he is, but I think Michael Edwards got to the point where it was like, I'm quite highly regarded here. I'd quite like it to stay that way, and I don't really want to sort of do this again for another 2 years and end up grey and sort of, depressed and hated.
This is what I'm saying. It's Liverpool version 3 next year, and suddenly the things fall into place. Then, all right, this season hasn't been great. We could still win a European Cup. You don't know. But you asked about structure and I didn't really answer your question.
It's all right.
I think a microcosm of a perfect example of this is Trent. When you talk about structure, right? So you're talking about one of the most supremely talented players in Europe. I think that's fair to say. The lad's won everything. But you talk about the structure of the team itself now. You see when all the component parts don't work. We talked about Thiago before and having the support behind them. Trent's all right. He's never going to be. No one ever has the perfect game of football week in, week out. But he is so essential to what this Liverpool team does and how Salah functions actually as well, I think. That, no one really, and with that used to it, no one really talks about what he does well, unless it's like an 80-yard half volley cut pass right across the pitch. But it's the structure that's let Trent down, not Trent letting the structure down. I think at times when he's been exposed at this game.
And you could say the same for Fabinho, I would argue.
Yeah.
You could say the same for
others. They're overexposed. The amount of times we look so stretched.
I think...
And this is what my point is around, our signing's going to solve it.
I'll let you in a second. I promise.
We might have to do a two-parter.
Yeah, sorry.
One agenda.
I think Thiago... my opinion on Thiago is I think Liverpool wanted to be more like City. So I think Liverpool went, we just won the league, and boy, we done well. But I still think Liverpool thought there was still an awful lot of games in there where could have gone either way. We all remember them. We all remember, Villa away. We all remember Crystal Palace and Wolves and games like that where you think, how good was that they won that? But that was stressful. That was a slog. And
we're all great.
Yeah, thanks. But Liverpool, I think, wanted to go, what can we do about that? Well, what does City do? City go 3-0 up in a lot of games, not always, but City have got games killed. We could do that by bringing in a bit more football. But what that does then is that means you've got 3 or 4 players who are sort of competing to be the player in the team. And Liverpool were really successful by having their fullbacks and their wide forwards doing it. If you're fronting the play down the middle, and what are you doing with your fullbacks? You can't have everything. You can't all have the ball at the same time. So I think there was always going to be a bit of a period where, I wasn't surprised at all to see maybe a little bit of a drop off. I think if you look at now Diaz coming in, I think that's underestimated what a massive shift that is in the way Liverpool play, because he does the same thing every time he gets the ball. Yeah. But it's good, but it's different. So you don't need Andy Robertson doing what he does in terms of bombing on, because Diaz is not going to give you the ball. He's going to dribble across the pitch. You've obviously lost Sadio Mane, who, what an underappreciated sort of physical presence he brought. Look what Liverpool do off the kickoff. The reason he do that is because Sadio Mane used to play for them and he used to just ping the ball out to him and he'd control it on his chest. body someone away and play the ball in.
Quick elbow.
Yeah. I mean, man, nearly the quickest red card you ever seen was that Chelsea, wasn't it? Espilicueta. But you sort of, your team's changing, but we're still expecting all the same people to be at the same levels of everything, and it is hard to do it, unless you're sort of Messi and Ronaldo. Not many people can do it for sort of more than 5 years, certainly not 10.
But without Mane and without Jota, especially, obviously Jota's still at the club, with them being injured, the press isn't right. And so often we talk about structural issues. We've made midfielders look like idiots sometimes. We've made our fullbacks look like idiots because the press isn't right. Yeah. And you saw Jota, I mean, obviously it's a very specialist game when you play City at Anfield, but what a difference he made and what he gave us in that game. We've just not had that enough. So often the press just hasn't been right. And then it's like a deck of cards, isn't it? So there's that issue with Diaz playing so differently. I still wonder if there's a more of a central role that we can get out of him, perhaps, and get him to give us more of something that Bobby gives us, maybe, because we have changed. It's been a big change the way we play. But then also you talk about, to the point on Man City, this behemoth that we're up against, and they go out and they spend 50 million on Phillips, a homegrown player. He's not kicked a ball. He's been injured. It's made no difference to them. 100 million on Grealish last season. He underwhelms. No difference to them. They're still romped to the title. We do have to be perfect. And I think if you look back over the tenure, you look back at what the scouting recruitment team have done over the last 10 years. Players like Oxlade-Chamberlain and Keita, for all their gifts, I wouldn't say they're mistakes or they're failures, because I don't think that's accurate, but their signings haven't been perfect because of their injury records, and we need to be perfect. Yeah. And we can't swallow a loss. We can't swallow a 60 million loss.
Yeah, I think the problem with those two is not... You can't criticise them for what they've given Liverpool, because I think they've given Liverpool what they had when they were available. And Liverpool have been successful when they've been there. But it's now, you've got nothing at the other end, of the sausage maker, if you like. You're going for nothing. You can't. If City want to sell Grealish, they will to, I don't know, probably to Chelsea or someone. They'll sell him to a rival for a good chunk of money. You look at obviously Raheem Sterling, Gabriel Jesus, the player Zinchenko. They've got great money for them. Liverpool have done well out of real fringe players. Players who never kicked the ball for the club. Like Marco Grujic and Harry Wilson. But maybe these are the players that they really could have financed a proper sort of refresh if they were done right. You could have got selling a player that is okay, but is not your top player for 50 million. It adds an awful lot, doesn't it? It means you can just go and, like you say, buy Calvin Phillips, or you can go and buy, it goes towards Declan Rice or whoever, but they've lost that. They've lost £80 million worth of talent for nothing, or they're going to.
And we end up being overly critical on the lads who are always available, or most of the time available, and the ones who go to the well for us. So Henderson and Fabinho, coming for so much criticism, and you think they run their legs off every week.
Milner,
what we ask of them, like Milner. I mean, Milner gets again a lot of criticism, but 9 times out of 10 when he comes on, he does the role he's asked to do and does it really well. But then we get ourselves into a position where you're talking about which of these players are we willing to let go. And I start getting a bit twitchy and think, well, we might need them.
But Neil, we're in a world feasibly in 12 to 18 months' time where you look at the team that won the league, you could be looking at a side that only contains the goalkeeper, Virgil van Dijk, Trent, Salah and Robertson. That's it. So you're talking about a whole new midfield. You've got Firmino, presumably a goal. You got Nunes being there, Jota,
Canate.
It's not like I don't. When people say Liverpool being lazy, there's a difference between lazy and negligent. I think they've seen that they've had to rebuild, but I think it just shows you how important that midfield area is, and maybe they've got the priorities wrong in which order they. Now that might be predicated by the fact that Sadio Mane, they may have wanted Sadio Mane on another contract, so you then park the forward line for the year, you do the midfield. You just don't know. So I kind of agree and disagree. I think they clearly know that this isn't going to last forever and needs to bring the average age down. But I think the way, without knowing the ins and outs of it, the way in which they've done it is being lopsided, if that makes sense.
I also think, go back to Salah, I know I've mentioned this twice, I want to make a point on it really, but up until June, they didn't know if Salah was staying or not. They were worrying. So they did have to have a little bit of a button there to go, well, he's going. We're either going to sell him or we're going to have to buy someone for the eventuality of him leaving on a free. So I understand that you can't just take the plunge and say, like, well, let's overhaul the midfield, because then it's like, yeah, we've got all these lovely midfielders in. By the way, your 30 goal a season strikers once out. What are you going to do? Are you going to? And you've got Mane, who's made it clear that he doesn't want to. He'd like to go as well. You've also got Firmino, sort of. I even think even after the early part of the season, it's clear he's on the decline, definitely physically, and I think in terms of his performance. So there was also the spectre of, never mind the midfield, the forward line needs a complete overhaul. So I can see the dilemma. I think I always thought Salah would sign, but I actually only found out quite recently just how sort of close Liverpool were to. It's over, we sort of have to give up on it. So
he's justified that with his numbers already.
Oh yeah, and I think everyone, we talk about reliability. He was the one, wasn't he? That if anyone was going to get that contract, it was going to be him, because you say, well, yeah, he will. But I think it's quite telling that the two that you would have said, oh, mega reliable, Gini Wijnaldum broke his leg, 3 months after.
Yeah.
And Sadio Mane's out for never had a long-term injury like that at Liverpool. So you sort of think, God, that was like.
You wonder what the arc's like.
Well, it feels like doing a cut and shut on a car, doesn't it? And someone goes, I've just bought this car. What's going on here? And that's two cars welded together. You know what I mean?
George, do you?
Yeah. But that's the succession. The succession planning. I don't really have a problem with us moving Mane on when we did. We'd started to see a decline from him before we moved him centrally, and he has that great revival as a forward. With Wijnaldum, like I said earlier, we've ran his legs off. So it's not so much them leaving; it's the succession planning, and it just feels like we've got ourselves into a position where there's so much to do. And you were talking about Gomez. I'm watching us thinking, we need to get another centre-half in. Matip's injuries, they're not going to, we need to get another centre-half in, plus 2 or 3 midfielders.
Do you think it's so hard, though, isn't it? There's a famous fable, isn't there, of, and I always think, there's a couple of things at play. I always think when teams get promoted from the Championship, I always think that's the time to sack your manager. But you'd never do it. You could never do it, could you? Because it's just crazy, isn't it? But you do it with the players. So you get promoted and go, well, he can't play in the Premier League, he can't play we need to buy 12 players. It's so hard to do it when you're at the top, isn't it? So I personally think you could have sold Joel Matip last summer, and because you say he's never going to play 50 games again in a season. We're never going to get that level from Joel Matip. But it's so hard. It must be so hard to do it when he's just done so much for your team, so much for your club, to go, that's your peak. To spot the peak. Jordan Henderson got a 3-year contract, didn't he? I thought.
Yeah, 4, I think.
4, yeah. And everyone sort of went. You were either in the camp of, fair play, he deserves it, or you were in the camp of, that's going to bite you somewhere down the line.
Yeah.
I think it's probably more likely to be the latter.
And it's so tricky, though, because he's the cultural leader, he's the captain, he means so much.
This is what I'm saying about the effect it has on the squad. It's of personality with the thing spot,
But then I look back on, my dad always talks about, the great Liverpool teams of the late 70s, early 80s. That's our conversation that we'll often turn to. And we were ruthless. Obviously we were...
Let them get old on someone else's box.
We were so ruthless. So many icons were sold when you would have thought they had a few more years left in the tank. People like Clements.
Keegan.
They go... And squad players too, like lads who you think, surely they could have done more for us. And they were going out the door. And it's such a balancing act. And obviously your greatest strength, greatest weakness, Jurgen, his loyalty, the way you give me everything, I'll give you everything.
United done that, didn't he, really well under Ferguson.
You say that, I disagree, because I think it's been talked about a little bit recently, the Ferguson. What Ferguson did is he shifted some problem people out. But when you think about other players that he stayed... So Gary Neville retired himself at half-time. So that wasn't Ferguson, that was Neville going, I can't cope with this anymore.
Stoke.
The Weds. Scholes retired and he brought him back. Yeah. So he retired and went, can you come back? And Roy Keane only went when he slagged off all his teammates on MUTV. And so I think there's a bit of a myth with Ferguson in particular. And also with Pep Guardiola. People say it about Pep Guardiola. Like, I speak to Dave Mooney for the coach home. He's been telling me for 3 years that Fernandinho couldn't run anymore. But so I don't think it's loyalty. I don't think it happened with Ferguson really. And I think, as I say, people talk about Jaap Stam and Van Nistelrooy and people like that. But I think there was always an incident really. I think if there
but
was
sometimes did he engineer them? I wonder.
Yeah.
Well, maybe, but look, listen, Roy Keane's kicking off about his teammates because there's probably an issue around.
Yeah, Van Nistelrooy,
he's being sort of pushed out. So I sort of get that really, but I think as long as you, also as well, like you look at someone like Ryan Giggs who's playing till the near the 40. I don't think it's necessarily true, and I don't agree with it for others. And I think when we talk about loyalty, I look at it in a slightly different way. I think it's trust, and I basically think they're all quite cautious, really, and think, who can I trust to do this? And I think that's what happened with Ferguson and Scholes. He's like, I could bring in a midfield. Money's a bit tight. The Glazers' money had dried up, and you could see the problems start. And he was like, I'll go out and get me equivalent to what we were talking about before, me lad for 25 million who can do this, or poor Scholes, I can get it, and he bring them back. And I don't think he brought him back necessarily because of loyalty. I think it's a trust for what they can do, and I think that's happened with Henderson. I think I can trust him not just on the pitch, but like you were saying before, Neil. And I think it's some of the things that we maybe undervalue, that we say like I think we sometimes misinterpret this as loyalty when it's actually something else.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I think that affects the Joel Matip situation we're just talking about, because we know how good he is when he's fit and he's available. We know what he brings. We know how well he plays with Virgil. We know how key he's been to everything we do. If we move Joel Matip on, we're not getting any money for him. And then how much is his replacement going to cost to get a player of similar quality who's 25?
Yeah.
And so money is often, it all comes back to...
I remember him saying that about Lovren. I remember he was asked about Lovren. I mean, obviously he ended up leaving, but it was way before that. And he was like, well, you tell me where the Dejan Lovren replacement is, because he went through, and whatever you think, he was like, he's brilliant in the air. He's a great trainer. He's a good talker. He's got enough pace. He can pass the ball.
Keeps Mo happy.
Well, I mean, I think he almost said that. He said the lads love him. He speaks 7 languages. He liaises with everyone in the dressing room. Go on then. Why would I do it? Why would I sort of just toss him aside? I think it now with
There's an argument we win the league if he stays.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, there'll be an argument now this summer about Quivine Kelleher. There'll be people saying, "Well, you can't keep him happy." He's like, "Why? Why not?" Unfortunately,
won more trophies than Everton in the last 25 years.
See that penalty he let in this week?
Yeah, on Irish TV.
The little kid.
Oh, yeah, I did. Yeah,
what an absolute hero he is.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on, Neil.
But there'll be an argument where people say, "Well, get some money in for him," and it's like, yeah, but what do you do then when your goalie gets injured? You sort of, sometimes you have to. I think Liverpool have been quite fair with players in the past. I think Lucas would be one. Lovren, Lallana, probably to a degree, where it's sort of like, thanks for everything, let them sort of go. But I think there was times where it was like, just tell them to do one and just keep them in the squad. Nathaniel, I remember them letting Nathaniel Klein go in that 2019 season. He dropped 4 points when he had, I think Milner played right back one game and Henderson played right back one game. And you think, I'm not saying Nathaniel Klein wins you the league, but he might have actually done just having another right back in the squad that time. So I understand it's completely hard to sort of say, oh, just go, because you think actually there might be 5 games that he plays, and you say we do not have there was 5 games last season when
he did all right.
He did all right. January especially, wasn't it? He scored a couple of goals.
Yeah.
But I do think over the course of time, you've got to take the plunge sometimes, and I think that's what Ferguson did particularly well. You're right. I think it wasn't like he gave up on players. It was more that they fell out with him.
Yeah.
But I think he owned the situation. You think of that summer where Mark Hughes and Kanchelskis and Ince go, and he made something of it, didn't he? Peter Schmeichel retires after the treble, and he makes something of it. I think he was able to sort of ride that out, where it feels a little bit like Liverpool are like, they don't want to let go of it because they don't believe that they can sort of.
But much like City now, invariably Ferguson had the money.
Yeah,
and that's always what it comes down to.
You talk about Ferguson, there, and it just occurred to me there with almost like a parallel situation with Thiago when they signed Varane, and it didn't work. Like Ferguson had this midfield that worked, and thought, "Oh, I know, let's bring this fella in, and it'll just be a million times better."
4-5. Well, it was Carlos Queiroz, wasn't it?
Yeah,
4,
and then
1.
and then it didn't. I'm not saying Thiago, it won't work with Thiago, but you still need the right.
And a little bit like Liverpool with City, I think Liverpool's obsession is a little bit City. They need to be more like City. I think United's was Europe. So United was we can dominate the league, but what we doing with these away games? So that they wanted to go like, so you can sometimes, I think your view can be a bit too wide, where you're sort of going, right, we need to solve all these problems. It's like actually just
But then
learn to win all your games, basically, which Liverpool sort of got pretty close to doing.
But couldn't you say that we've influenced City back going the other way? You look at Cancelo and the way they operate with their fullbacks now as well. But they've obviously, that being said, with far more resource and...
Possibly, I think. I mean, I don't know. I think maybe Haaland's more the influence. You know, City have just sort of go, let's just kill the league by Christmas. You know, like let's just try and do that rather than sort of, you know, be so adherent to our formula. Let's just get into a position where we
just be more direct.
We just win.
Yeah.
You know, like it doesn't matter how we play. Almost we win, and as luck would have it for them, they've got the players that they can play brilliantly as well.
Okay, let's look ahead then, and what we think will happen, what we think needs to happen. So, are we all assuming that Naby, Chamberlain, and Milner go in the summer, or does anyone think that one or more of them might stay?
I think Chamberlain's gone.
I think this would be Milner's swan song as well. I think this would be Milner's last.
Yeah, the only way I could see it would be if it was just a very late decision again, like this season, where it was just.
It was a week before he signed.
Yeah, it's a bit, you know, it's sort of like we may as well, you know. But you look at he's getting all. He's still shown. I mean, listen, the best performance Liverpool have put in this season, he was in it.
What an incredible servant for Liverpool, by the way.
An incredible Premier League player, isn't he? You know, he's one of them. You'll never ever get a mention in an all-time Premier League. But if you were doing a sort of servant, sort of, you know, a longevity, he's right in there with Oldham of 600 games. I could maybe see an outside chance of him getting another year, just, you know, maybe
But that's if he wants it as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, he had some opportunities in the summer. I'm not going to answer the Keita one because I can't get my head around what you do with Keita.
I think that's the trickiest of them all because he played 40 games last year, and a lot of them he was brilliant. And I just, who's going to come in for him? You know, who's going to want to take a risk on him with his record? And we know that
his contract's out in the summer, isn't it? So it's.
But it's even the wages, though. I think it's a big commitment, and we know that Jurgen loves him, and Jurgen just thinks.
And he's 27. You know, he's one of the few midfield. Well, he's probably the only midfielder in the squad. Fabinho's 29.
Yeah.
He's still theoretically got his prime ahead of him. You know, soon, and I think it's such a tough one.
And there'll be people listening to this saying, "You're mad.
Yeah,
you're mad. You've got to get rid. What are you talking about?"
Hi, Kev, how are you?
Yeah, I completely understand it. You know, I think you could sell it either way.
But there's also a thing about leaving yourself almost with too much to do, isn't there? Because, you know, I'm going to go on to talk now about, you know, what skills we think we're missing and stuff like that. But, you know, if three go, then the first thing you're missing is just bodies, isn't it? It's just sorts of people. And I remember last year looking at the forward situation, and it was before Mo had signed the new contract, it was before Sadio was leaving, and you were like, there's just a lot to do here. And so when Mo signed and Sadio went, it was like, well, at least we've sorted something. Do you know what I mean? Rather than this idea that the three lads are on a free. Now it's just Bobby Firmino who's out next summer. But at the moment, you know, I'd almost be in favour of giving Keita a new contract. You know, as long as it's not mega money, just for one less midfielder. You need.
You're also protecting his value as well.
Yeah. You, I mean, the gamble is he could play 40 games, and then you've got him playing 40 games, which you can probably bank on that he'll be all right. He'll play quite well, but also you could you're suddenly putting 30 million into your potential pot, which wasn't there previously. But yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, I'm just imagining the tweet, you know, like the heads up. Ooh, some news is coming. Naby Keita signed a new 4-year contract. I can imagine the comments underneath just going, "Oh, what are we doing? Like what?" You know, I can imagine that.
Well, they announced Paul Phillips on deadline day, didn't they? I felt so sorry for him. They could have waited.
Did one with Jordan, didn't he? I think his was on a deadline day as well.
They could have waited.
Start doing the old stadium updates on bad days as well. The old Everton trick.
The old Everton trick. Yeah, you filled in some concrete. Yeah.
So what skills do you think we're missing, Neil? You know, if you were looking at. So let's say that the Chamberlain goes, let's say that the Milner goes, and let's, for example, argue that the Keita signs a new deal and sort of stays. So, you know, we need new bodies in midfield. Is there anything particular do you think it's missing, or do you think it's purely a reliability? If you can add reliability and quality, then you're happy.
Yeah, I mean, obviously reliability such an X factor. Someone with a good fitness record is a massive thing. But I go back to what Andy said earlier. You've got to have a certain amount of people to carry the piano, and we haven't got enough. I watched Newcastle against Chelsea the other week, and I just thought, God, they're grafting hard here, Newcastle, and they've got 3 or 4 quality players, and then they've got loads of lads just putting in an unbelievable shift. And I think we need to get back to a certain degree of physicality and stamina and legs, if you want to call it that. Sign some legs. Players with durability, a physical presence. Again, I think he's an incredibly talented player, but I can't get away from the fact that Harvey Elliott's 5'7". Thiago puts himself about the pitch, but he's not quick. He's not the most imposing player. Fabinho isn't fast. I think it's safe to say he struggles sometimes on the turn. So I think we need to be signing a real physical presence. Now, whether that's a Declan Rice, someone who's powerful, who carries the ball, someone who's strong in the air, someone who offers a lot of those qualities. I'm not sure. You didn't really ask me about names, but they're the sort of names that are being talked about. And I just think about, well, how much is it going to cost to prize away West Ham's captain, an England international?
It's pretty much the side he's going next summer.
I think he's got 18 months.
Yeah, he's got another year,
But they're still not going to let him go for...
No. And he'll have options.
Yeah.
I think he's going to go to Chelsea.
I think Chelsea.
So I wonder whether it's more, as I said earlier, that no one's unknown of. There's no like secrets, is there, in football, we always say. But there are players that you look at Caicedo at Brighton, and they signed him for $4.5 million.
Yeah, it is just sort of easier for them though, and it's funny because.
But can we not now pinch him for $30 million?
Well, we can, and that's what they've done. Well, I mean, the problem is that it's getting more and more expensive to get these, and it's interesting. I'll come to you, Neil, because Enzo Fernandez is a Twitter favourite at the moment, and listen, I watched him for Argentina the other day. He's great, but 2 years ago he was on loan, so he was being loaned out to get minutes. And
Benfica signed him for $9 million.
Yeah, and so you think, well, why don't we do that? But if he'd only had 1 year at River Plate, really, so he's on loan, and then River Plate bring him back, and he has a standout year from everything I can gather sort of last season, and then Benfica get him for $9 million, and then he looks brilliant. But he only made his Argentina debut in September, I think it was, and so. What I think with these lads, Neil, is that it's a big shout for someone like Liverpool to go in and get him last summer, even for €10 million, which by the way goes up if Liverpool are interested. What Liverpool have done and done well is that, okay, we'll let you move on to Benfica. We'll see how you do there. We'll see how you go with that step up, and then if we think you're ready, similar with the Brighton thing, we'll get you. And I think that's worked well for them, and I think it makes logical sense. And I don't know whether this is the kind of thing where Jurgen was talking about with risks, I don't know, but I think part of the problem now is that, I mean, Neil mentioned 30 million there before. I think, the old days of we'll let him go there for 10 and we'll get him for 30. Suddenly it's now 60, 70, isn't it? And we're seeing that with Caicedo.
Just gone for 50.
Exactly. Million, so that's where the problem. So I don't think Liverpool can. I mean, there's work permits issues and stuff like that as well, of course. But I think it's tough to know when Liverpool should have bought Enzo Fernandez, even though watching him and seeing him how good. Do you get me?
Yeah, I do. I also think it's hard, isn't it? Who are great midfielders? Like that. There are great midfields and great midfielders, and I think you can have one without the other, or a little bit. Neil's right and says Harvey Elliott's 5'7" and Thiago and this, but I look at who are the European champions? It's Toni Kroos, Luka Modric. Toni Kroos is 34, Luka Modric 37. Casemiro was in that side. He's gone on. They weren't a Liverpool. If Liverpool had that midfield, you wouldn't say, well, we've added legs or we've added much,
no.
In that sense. So that's tough. But I look at there was a player I watched this season against Liverpool, and I made a note. I said, he's Liverpool. Brendan Aronson for Leeds. I watched him and I thought he made Liverpool look old. And Tyler Adams played in the game, and I think he played against England. I didn't watch it, but I think he was the most impressive player against England the other night. And they're not great players. I don't think they cost incredible amounts of money. They would refresh Liverpool, but would they make Liverpool any better than they've been in the last few years? They might add some legs and energy. But
will they do the main stands heading?
Yeah,
there is an element of that, though.
Yeah. You know, I thought watching that, I thought Leeds. I don't think Leeds were that good.
They dominated us though in the middle, didn't they?
But they made Liverpool look their age, and they sort of almost reminded it was like a wake up call of like, we've lost a bit of energy, haven't we? Or we've lost a bit of legs in this team. So I do think you can find players that would change that. It's just a question of what do you want? Do you want to get back your energy and become the underdogs again, or do you want to actually reaffirm yourself as we're the top dogs and we have the best players? We don't just have the most hungry players. We have top level talent.
But and there's no guarantees in football either. I mean, people look to an obvious example who I'm sure his name will come up shortly. But there's no sure thing. It's like your mate who wins a decent bet. He only ever tell you about the ones that come in. He never tell you ones that they've lost out on. I'll give you an example. Renato Sanchez. Renato Sanchez was a Benfica, went for massive money to Bayern Munich. And all right, he's kind of he was on loan at Fulham.
Yeah,
for a bit.
Swansea.
Swansea. Sorry.
Swansea,
and you know, all right, he's at PSG now, but they've took the gamble there where Bayern Munich brought him in, thought he was ready-made, but he still needed that extra year. And you talk about Matthias Nunes at Wolves, and Liverpool were in for him. He ended up going to Wolves anyway, but you talk about where there might be value. Wolves are in dire financial straits there. So it'll be interesting to see how his season plays out. Because you talk about the lad for Brighton, whose name I can't pronounce.
No, I can't even say it.
Moises Caicedo.
Yeah,
I don't even care if it was right.
That's why he's a professional.
There you go. But one thing you'll say with Brighton, they'll want big money. They're not soft.
Yeah.
They're not soft. Whereas, you know, if Nunes has a good season at Wolves, there might be an opportunity to get him, given the Wolves situation. But what happens if, and I used Sanchez as an example, it didn't work out for him. So let's just say the one who shan't be named, you know, Dortmund will sign the player. You're not telling me every player Dortmund signed at that level, for 15, 20 million, that every project player they sign works out, because they don't. They don't. And hindsight's fucking brilliant. Go, oh yeah, well Liverpool should have got him at this. Can you imagine if Liverpool had spent money, like fairly big money on one of these players, and it didn't work out?
Yeah.
Because all you'd be hearing is, well, you know, we can't afford him because we bought that fucking that dickhead.
Yeah. Well, United went all in for Bellingham as well at that point, didn't they? And he just decided he wants to go to Dortmund because he thought it was the best place for him.
Jadon Sancho.
Well, yeah.
Case
City had him, didn't he?
Yeah.
City had him and sort of let him go.
We were talking about what we like. You said to me what I'm looking for in midfield, and I think that we were just talking then. It's the fight. I know it kind of sound my age a bit, but dinosaur saying this. But
Needs a Steven Gerrard. That's basically what we need.
But winning the right to play, and the much maligned Brexit midfield, that every time they stepped on the pitch, you knew that for the first 15, 20 minutes, if a team tried to kick us, we'd kick them back.
Yeah.
And if they tried to outrun us, well, good luck.
Yeah.
You know, the energy and fight that we had and that we've seen in
the
games.
Platform for others to play.
Yeah, and I've seen in games, I've watched the likes of Newcastle, seen Leeds, and seen teams that have got that. And I don't think it has to be a superstar. I think I understand obviously we're talking about Bellingham, what a potential acquisition he would be. But I almost feel like that needs to be simultaneously, we need to be looking for
complemented by something else.
Yeah.
Do you not think that when you look at Liverpool this season, and it's not because they won't, it's because they can't. We've lost the ability to bail each other out.
Yeah.
A little bit.
There's not been enough.
Do you know what I mean?
That, yeah.
Like, you know, so where I am on the Kop, sometimes if we're getting attacked towards the away end, we lose the ball on the outside. So how many goals have we lost on the counter this year?
Yeah.
And you're going, oh no.
And every team makes mistakes.
Yeah.
The best ones bail out the mates.
Yeah. Whereas in previous seasons, we'd lose the ball and you'd be like, but then last minute someone would come flying across, put the ball out, take a yellow on the half right, but we're not even getting near enough to get that yellow in the centre circle.
There's been a lack of aggression as well, hasn't there?
Sorry.
There's been a lack of aggression.
Yeah, but again, I don't think that's a deliberate thing. I just think that's where we are as a squad.
I think also you've got to factor in that Liverpool have been there so specifically. Their style has been there for everyone to see in every single game of every season. You know, so all the talk is Liverpool play this way, and how do you stop Trent? How do you stop Salah? How do you do it? And eventually, someone will find the way. That they will always find a way.
Nothing's ever new in football.
Yeah, not exactly. And you know, everything's trendy, isn't it? You know, we're looking back to Germany played Spain yesterday, and they've done this sort of feature on the golden team of Spain, and it felt like that'd last forever, didn't it? You know, you thought, well, this is football. They've completed it, haven't they? How can you ever how can football ever be played a different way? But it was.
But then it was Germany after that.
Yeah, and
it was France.
Took it on with more physicality, and then
it was France. It was France before that.
Yeah, you know, it's in the 90s. You know, you were looking at Brazilian way was just the only way that you could play. So there will always be a nature to it. It's how. And not many clubs do it. Not many clubs can sustain that, where they go from one era to the next seamlessly. There's always a spectacular, often a spectacular like humiliation that sort of triggers you. You know, remember Barcelona beaten by Bayern, I think 7-0 in the semi-final of the Champions League.
Brazil got tonked.
Brazil got done 7-1.
Yeah.
You know, I think Germany obviously humiliated in the last World Cup. You know, defending the trophy. It's really, really difficult to do it. You know, to get that right, because you think about Liverpool in the sort of 90s, you don't see it. You don't see it until it's happened almost. You know, you're in there and you're thinking, well, it's all right. You know, there's a lot of people, we haven't even discussed Fabinho in this discussion yet. There's a question about Fabinho, because we're all in that position now where I'm thinking he'll be all right. But what if he's not? You know, what if it's not?
Well, what if a decent offer comes from him in the summer?
Virgil van Dijk's form at the start of the season. You talk about bailing people out. He's the best example of it. Trent and Robertson have been left because Van Dijk just steps across and takes the ball, and you don't even notice Trent was halfway up the pitch because Van Dijk's got it. What if that's the sort of, you know, that was his last hurrah last season? You don't know until it's happened.
But the counterpoint to us being found out is that we have, as you said, we've changed significantly. We have tried to evolve, you know, playing Trent as a false nine, whatever the role is, Trent in that sort of 8 position, Trent inverted fullbacks, where we brought in Thiago and had this shift. I found myself just thinking, I quite like the way we used to play. You know, it's not like we've been found out by what worked for us when we won the league. We've been found out by doing. We tried to do something very different, and so far it's not as good. You know, winning 26 of the first 27, you're not going to do that every season. I understand, but we were just physical brutes, weren't we? We're just absolute monsters. We just bludgeon people to death.
I think I'd like a steel of in the mind, you know, a belief that they were going to do it. I don't think that's there at the moment.
Okay.
Are we going to look when we win the European Cup and we listen back to this?
I mean, we'll look fine as ever, Andy. As ever, yeah, we were okay. We actually enjoy Liverpool's success, so there we are.
Happy to be wrong is my sort of response.
Well, there we are. There we are. That's the Anfield Wrap. We all just want to win. Hope you've enjoyed that. There'll be plenty more over the summer. I wanted to get a little bit into more Jude Bellingham, but you know, there's going to be enough chat about that over the next 12 months. Let's face it. There's also some interesting stuff around the fact that Liverpool need a new director of football, or do they? Depending on who you sort of listen to, we'll see. And obviously, you know, how soon this is all going to get going. But there'll be loads of chat across all our subscription shows on this. Rob Gutman is insisting on doing a gut of the week at the moment. Our transfer show, award-winning, transfer show that the Rob insists. So that'll be going on. So there'll be plenty of speculation on when Liverpool are going to start with it. I'd like to see them personally start in January, but we'll see if that happens. But as I say, loads more chat about the midfield on our subscription service. So the AnfieldWrap.com/subscribe. Also, I would encourage everyone to go for both the audio and video options at the moment, because we've got this absolutely brilliant Klopp documentary coming out. It's going to be 3 parts in December, 2 more to follow in the spring, I think it is, of next year. So make sure you subscribe to the video. We've got a little audio advert for the video product, if that's not too confusing, that we're going to play for you now. It'll whet your appetite. I'm sure everyone's going to love it. The first one is out on YouTube as well, so if you don't quite believe me how good this first one is going to be, then you can see for yourself, and then you'll be clamouring over. But in the meantime, thanks a lot to both Niels and to Andy, for Ash for doing the bits on the 1s and 2s at the side as well. Have a lovely week. Up the Reds.
Well, that's a hard gig, isn't it? Because you've got to be the best manager in the most competitive league possible. And then the extra bit in Liverpool is you've got to be a man of the people.
The people from Mainz wasn't interested in Mainz 05. That changed when Jürgen was the coach.
From the moment he came here, he was aware that this is about more than just football.
Key to his success is, you know, rejuvenation of the fan base, you know what I mean? We feel alive again. We feel wanted again. We feel part of something again.
He changed everything.
And everything got bigger because there was a coach
pointing in the right direction.
When he first walked through the door, that's how we all felt. It was like, this is how we're going to win. This is what's required to win. Do it.
Also, ich glaube, das Wichtigste, wenn man über Jürgen Klopp redet, ist, dass zu 100% authentisch ist.
He actually broke down crying and said, I didn't realise winning here would mean as much as it did.
He cares about the journey, about the process, about the relationships, about the emotive pull.
I think he has Gladden still in his heart. He never forgot his roots.
Gibt's ein Spieler auf die rechte Seite, eine Granate? Da war Jürgen Klopp.
He made our club famous worldwide.
He's got everything that is basic going into any form of management.
His whole life in the school as a child, when everyone said no chance, Jürgen said, it's a chance.